Has anyone heard of John Clifford Peel? This bloke liked to be known as Clifford Peel. When we think about the Royal Flying Doctor Service, I was doing a bit of poking around because I'm going to be followed by Chris Beattie, who's going to be talking about a Royal Flying Doctor incident. So I started to hunt around for a bit of information on the Flying Doctor Service. And of course, when you think of the RFDS, you naturally think of the Rev.Dr. John Flynn. In about 1908, he was transferred to a northern town in South Australia. And it was there that he got the first idea that people in the outback needed some help. He was interested in their spiritual, social and medical needs. This is where he started on the idea of the Australian Inland Mission. The Flying Doctor was still a long way off. He produced a number of pamphlets over the years, but the one which had the most effect was this one here, called A Call to the Church. It was a 48-page booklet which got reasonably good circulation in the outback. Around about that time, 1912, there was an 18-year-old enrolled as a medical student in Melbourne, and he came across one of these books and he was pretty impressed with it. He had an interest in aviation, and by this time Flynn had set up the Australian Inland Mission, and there's evidently communication as early as 1914-15 between Flynn and Clifford Peel. According to Peel's family, he was impressed with Flynn's vision, and the two of them worked very closely by correspondence rather than talk to each other. Peel wrote regarding the transport in the outback because he had an interest in aeroplanes and aviation, and between the two of them they worked out the idea of communication by air. In 1917, Peel joined the Australian Flying Corps and trained as a pilot. He arrived in the UK on the HMAT Nestor it was the end of 1917, maybe 18. Arrived in the UK and spent some months training as a pilot for operations over the Western Front. That's the Nestor, the ship departing Melbourne, and he could be easily one of those faces on that ship. While at sea, Peel wrote a lengthy letter to Flynn, setting out the practical plan for the use of an aircraft to communicate with the widely dispersed people of the outback. In his letter, he chose 3 centres, Oodnadatta, and that of course was chosen because Flynn had worked in that area nearby, and the lines radiating out from there are to the points that he suggested where the service could go. Cloncurry, he suggested as another centre. Interesting. Katherine, and even going across as far as Wyndham and to Borroloola on the Gulf there. So they were the 3 points of radiation that Peel suggested, and this was included in the letter to Flynn. From the Katherine Centre, he picked a number of destinations: Darwin, Borroloola, Daly Waters, Powell Creek. He worked out the distance in miles. He must have had a fairly good map with him on the ship, and at 90 miles an hour he worked out the time that it would take for each of these journeys to take place, so that Flynn could administer in the way that he hoped. From Cloncurry, they were the towns that he looked at, and distances and times. Oodnadatta, they were the towns that he suggested. And of course there could have been others which could have been added to the list later on, but these are the ones specifically mentioned in his letter. He went on and had obviously a fair bit of spare time on the ship. Probably took 3 weeks or a month to get to England, and he looked at the outlay for 4 aircraft, what they could achieve, the capital to purchase them, sheds. The term hangar hadn't been widely used at that time, 1917, late 1917, 18. So there we were, direct extracts from his letter. He went into running expenses, depreciation and repairs, and capacity. He must have picked a pretty big aircraft with a capacity of 2,500 pounds, but anyway, that's what he came up with. So this is what ended up in John Flynn's hands in the beginning of 1918, and it was signed by John Clifford Peel, J. Clifford Peel, Lieutenant, Australian Flying Corps, AIF, at sea in November. All right, so that was the type of aircraft that Peel graduated to after going through some flying training. He and his observer, Lieutenant Jeffreys, disappeared while on a reconnaissance flight over France on the 19th September 1918. No trace of them or the aircraft was ever found, and the war was only 7 weeks, I'm pretty sure about 7 there. That's where he crashed, in that he was doing a survey in that area, taking aerial photography of the canal in that area that was being used for the transport of military material. There's a memorial at Arras in France with the names of 1,000 airmen on it, and Peel ends up on that list. So between the two of them, they really were the first to organise an air transport or aerial ambulance system. That was the first aircraft that the Australian Inland Mission got. It was supplied by Qantas contract, and that aircraft appears on the $20 note. There it is, there's the aircraft there. And Flynn gets mentioned as being the man who set up the AIM, Australian Inland Mission, in 1928. Traeger joined forces with him and had half of Australia under radio contact by 1929. Flynn got the OBE, passed away in 1951. There's a memorial to Flynn west of Alice Springs, quite a notable memorial with a devil's marble on top of it. The RFDS was set up in 1954. Just to finish off, the first official RFDS aircraft in Western Australia is this one here, John Markham. John owned that aircraft for many years, and it's got a very colourful history. Prior to that, there were a couple of names, Cato and Fenton, did a bit of flying out of Wyndham before the RFDS got going. And of course, here we have the latest addition to the RFDS, which is the VHRIO, Romeo India Oscar, which is a Hawker 800.
And can I just give you some figures on the Foxmoth?
Yep.
Foxmoth was brought into Australia by McRobinson Millers in 1935 and was leased to the Flying Doctor Service stationed in Port Hedland at, I think it was 2 cents a mile or something. And the Flying Doctor Service actually bought it in 1948, I think, and it became the first aircraft owned by the Flying Doctor Service of Western Australia, and it continued in operation with them until 1960. Well, it still carries the same registration today as it did when it was changed to that registration from the English registration, and has carried it right through its lifetime.
Well, myself and my colleagues used to work on it, and one day Horry Miller came out, as he did just about every day of the week, to see there wasn't too much dust on the benches and that. And he came out to test fly it and said to me, "You want to come for a flight, lad?" He called everyone lad. And I said, "Yeah, okay, Horry." So he said, "Get in," and away we went, and he took me for a flight.
Another connection with history. Small correction with numbers there. Murray, you mentioned 2 cents a mile. I think it was 2 shillings a mile.
I don't think so. But anyway,
it
was under lease anyway.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so that's from the very inception of Air Transport Australian Inland Mission and the Royal Flying Doctor Service.